Hey folks, have I got a treat for you? You see, June was the first month that I actually had any kind of free time in a long while, so I watched a heckin' lot of films. Some of them were actually at the pictures as well as at home. But anyway, I'll get to those ones soon, but first, I'll tell you about the films I watched in the comfort of my own wee living room. Now, there's not many films out there that are so forgettable that you forget they even existed, even after having watched them. Unless maybe it's The Judge, a film so humdrum I completely forgot that I'd actually watched it, which is why I'm mentioning it now while I still remember. What was I talking about? Oh, anyway. Silent Trigger is an action movie with a group of mediocre actors trying to make a movie that doesn't want to be boring but somehow manages to be completely forgettable nonetheless. It's all about Dolph Lundgren, and he's a big time government sniper dude, but when he refuses to shoot a target because she's holding a baby, he gets the sack, and the sack means getting dead. Dead sacked. Only he doesn't actually get dead, and a few years or months or maybe even weeks later he gets employed again, with the same spotter as before, who was already ordered to kill him last time. Strange. Anyway, they have to make the shot from a building that's still under construction, so they need to head up there the night before and get prepped, but it also turns out that the security guard there is a coked up sex maniac, and also there might be something quite sinister going on in the background. And it's basically a by-the-numbers action schlock movie anytime that the bonkers security redneck guy isn't on screen, although props for having her off coupling in it, who does her best, and Dolph Lundgren generally just looks bored for most of the movie, and this is like 2 out of 5 at best, and chances are you'll have forgotten you've even seen it before you wonder why it was called Silent Trigger, especially when all the gunshots in it were so very loud. Next up in June was a Netflix movie called Awake, and I'll make the obvious joke here that it nearly put me to sleep. But no, really, it was pretty dull. Basically, this is a movie we've either seen before or read before in a bad Stephen King novel or a knockoff of Stephen King or a movie that's based vaguely on that idea. It's essentially all about this wifey who's hanging out with her kids who kind of hate her and her mother-in-law who kind of hates her, and then the world goes bad and there's a big flash that kills all the electrical equipment, but it turns out it's also stopped people being able to sleep, so everyone starts to go mad from lack of sleep. Luckily, she knows an army doctor who kind of hates her, so they have to drive away to a secret base beset by many maddos and other problems along the way. In fairness, this isn't actually that bad an idea. I mean, an apocalypse that does something weird and out there, Bird Box did something like that, where if you saw the bad thing, you suicided, and that was kind of passable, and the Stephen King book Cell had people going mad if you listened to a mobile phone, so why not a solar flare that gives everyone chronic insomnia? The trouble is it's really badly written and edited and the actors absolutely don't sell it, which is strange because there's some well-known names in this. I mean, there's the guy who was on Iron Fist in Game of Thrones and he's in it for about 2 seconds, and the sniper from Saving Private Ryan, and her off of Annihilation. Actually, both of them were off Annihilation. But anyway, this is 1.5. Completely skip it, watch something else, because, it's not woefully, painfully awful, but it's just boring and really uninventive. So yeah, really no need. On the other hand, a film that I did kind of like was Irezumi, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Anyway, this is a 1966 Japanese movie about a young couple who try and run off together, sort of eloping, mostly at the instigation of the girl, but turns out the innkeeper they rely on to smooth things over with their parents sets up a murder kidnap and sells her to a brothel, where she ends up getting a giant spider tattooed on her back. But that ends up unleashing her anger and vengeance since she starts to basically screw over all the guys who got her in that situation and end up getting them murdered. It's not a bad film though. It's a solid 3 out of 5, really well shot, but also really basic in terms of the story and the dialogue, but worth checking out. Although definitely not on a par with the top tiers of that era, your Kurosawa movies like Yojimbo or The Seven Samurai, but still, definitely worth checking out. And another example in the land of not really amazing was Runaway. And yeah, I don't mean the Kanye West experimental music video Runaway. I mean the Michael Crichton directed movie with Tashman himself, Tom Selleck, as a future cop in charge of an anti-robot unit in the police force. Yeah, this is about as near future as people imagined in the 1980s, where everybody has a giant robot helper to do things, kind of like out that Rocky movie. And as usual, Crichton has come up with a story about how man's hubris with technology is going to be his downfall. Anyway, Gene Simmons from Kiss is in it as a kind of creepy, slimy tech genius who's reprogramming the robots to do his evil bidding and take over the world or something, and Tom has to figure it out and stop him, but with robots everywhere, can he really trust anything? Anyway, it was okay. It was horribly dated, so I don't know, 2 out of 5 for this. It wasn't the worst film I've ever seen, but God knows, I don't think I'd ever want to watch it again. Now, as I said earlier, one amazing thing that happened this June was the reopening of the cinemas. Yep, all the multiplexes and wee screens are all back open again, so I made sure that I got my masks on and then went to the cinema screen as soon as I could. And I celebrated my first film back in the pictures for over a year by watching... Okay, so you might not have heard of this, but there's a computer game series called Monster Hunter, which I haven't actually played, but I'm told it's all about dudes in a weird alien world fighting giant beasties for money and stuff. They hunt monsters. They are monster hunters. But in the movie, it instead follows Milla Jovovich, and she's the major of this company of soldiers, and they're looking for a missing team in the desert that disappeared, only they wind up getting zapped into this strange world, just like the previous bunch, and soon enough, it ends up just her on her own, everyone else is dead, and what weird random people she meets in the alien world are either strange beasties or crazy funny looking people in daft costumes who hunt monsters, and soon enough she has to do all kinds of kick-ass action to fight off these massive beasties. Now, this is a basic movie. I mean, it's hardly surprising when it comes to computer game adaptations, but there's not like there's been that many that have actually been much cop. Most of them been kind of rubbish, and that's mostly because computer game plots usually aren't very clever. But Milla has actually been making films like this for years, being the star of the Resident Evil movie series, which were mostly either produced, written, or directed, or all three, by her husband, Paul W.S. Anderson, who also wrote and directed this. And yeah, it's schlock. I mean, it's total schlock. 2 out of 5, take out your brain nonsense. I mean, maybe this is a 3 out of 5 if you're a 12-year-old boy who plays the computer game, because it'd probably make more sense to you than it did to me, but for everybody else, probably not worth the effort. Another film which was a bit more cerebral was In the Earth, and this is a film by Ben Wheatley, the eclectic English film director of such movies as the black and white art house epic weirdness Mushroom Trip, A Field in England, the creepy horror thriller Kill List, and the satire of 70s dystopia High Rise, and a load of other films from various genres that he's been churning out that some are good, some are bad. But during the pandemic, old Ben decided to shoot a film with minimal crew and cast in the woods down south, presumably near where he lives, and set the story around a scientist heading out to check on an experiment during a pandemic. Only, as the guy gets further out there with his guide, so does the movie, as it's clear that they're being watched by somebody, and there might just be something weird and supernatural in the woods, and there might also just be someone nasty. Now, this wasn't a bad film. I mean, Ben Wheatley knows how to make a good film, and he definitely manages to maintain the interesting excitement of this film in what could have on other hands been just completely boring stuff, especially as the large chunk of the film is pretty repetitious, especially towards the end. But it also has a whole load of the bonkers mushroom trippy stuff that A Field in England also had a lot of, only it kind of worked a lot better in A Field in England, whereas in this it just feels a little bit overdone and out of place. But it's not a bad film, it's just one that I found kind of meh, so it's only getting 3 out of 5 as a result. I mean, it is a decent film and it has good performances, the actors do a good job, but it left me a bit cold. And while thematically it does fit with his earlier films, it did also feel like a bit of a throwback, rather than a continuation or an evolution of his career and his abilities. But it is an odd one, so yeah, check it out if you feel like it, but it's a hard one to recommend. And the last film that I saw in June was F9, or Fast and Furious 9, or The Fast and the Furious 9, or whatever on earth they're actually calling it these days. Now, the Fast and the Furious series is a franchise that has been a total guilty pleasure of mine for quite a long while. I mean, ever since the first film, which was just all stealing cars with basically the plot stolen from Point Break, and then right through to the weird homoerotic love story of the second movie and the side story in Tokyo, and then into the weird, increasingly crazy series of adventures, this series that started out with stealing cars has now basically become a completely over-the-blown action series, and that's always kind of tickled me a bit. And F9 is the movie where they finally come to Scotland. Yes, I mean, not only here, but to pretty much the same location that they shot a whole bunch of Avengers Infinity War, and you know, the big scene where they're based in literally the same street as Avengers. Yeah, remember the big church that they have a fight on? Well, in Fast 9 they're actually underneath it, but obviously the film isn't just that, it's set in like 5 different countries with loads of different action scenes and lots of crazy stuff going on. And the plot, well, I mean, it's nonsense, but it's a big James Bondish sort of thing about a space weapon of mass destruction and Vin Diesel's secret brother that's never been mentioned before, and he turns up in bad, and oh look, there's a lot of bad daft plot justification for many car chases, fist fights, and some bits where dudes have to ram a satellite with a car in space. So look, it's utter claptrap, but it's fun claptrap, and by 9 movies into this series, now if you don't really know what you're getting into, I don't know why you'd be watching it. Still, it is a decent enough film. It's 3 out of 5, no more than that, because while it is functional, it's not in any way particularly innovative or interesting, and actually the script here is less good than some of the previous movies. And I think that's down to the fact that some of the writing team have actually changed on this, and the main writer, who was on all the previous movies, wasn't involved. And it kind of shows a wee bit, so hopefully they'll get him back or sort all that out, because yeah, it would be nice for it to return to its former glory for the inevitable Fast 10 or FX or whatever they end up calling it. So that was it for June. A month where I actually not only had a load of nice summer weather, but I also managed to watch a bunch of films and get back into the cinema. And I hope everyone else managed to have a pretty good time of it as well. And I hope you're enjoying the summer no matter what you've been doing. And with any luck, these reviews have maybe helped you steer towards or away from some films that you might like or not. But till next time, these were my grumpy opinions. And a special thanks to all my patrons, and most especially my top tier patrons Judith Coloma, Laurie Laporte, and Michelle Forbes. Thanks guys, everyone keep it real, keep safe, and take care of yourselves. Bye bye.